She left the house at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday in August. Not in her car. She decided to take her bicycle. It was the first time she'd ever made that trip without driving. 6 miles through wooded roads she knew well, past the kind of countryside where the trees close in close, and you can ride for half an hour without seeing another soul. She was 20 years old. She was owed to check on her horse, and she borrowed a pair of boots from her little sister before she headed out the door. Those boots would sit in a police evidence locker for the next 36 years. And the thing that was going to solve this case, the thing that was always going to solve this case, was sitting right there on the outside of the left boot, undetected, invisible to everyone who handled it, until it wasn't. Her name was Judy Loomis. She lived in a rural stretch of unincorporated Snohomish County in Washington State, the kind of place that's been absorbed by suburbs now, but in 1972 was just dirt roads, open fields, and properties spaced far enough apart that nobody was watching anybody else. She lived at home with her parents, her 12-year-old sister Jana, and her fiancé Jim Roberts. She kept a horse named Saudi at a stable on Stroma Road, about 6 miles northeast. She rode regularly. She usually drove. On August 23, 1972, she didn't. She set out on Penny Creek Road just after 5 in the afternoon, pedaling a white 10-speed bicycle on a route that took her through wooded stretches with almost no traffic. Somewhere along that route, partway to the stable, there was a dirt track that branched off into the trees. That's where she was stopped. About 30 minutes later, a young couple drove up that same track looking for somewhere to do target shooting. Instead of a quiet patch of woods, they found a woman on the ground, barely dressed, unresponsive, a single gunshot wound above her right ear from a .22 caliber pistol. She was still alive when they found her. They put her in their car and drove 15 minutes to Stevens Memorial Hospital in Edmonds. She was pronounced dead on arrival. The couple's names were never released. They'd gone out to shoot cans in the woods and instead found a dying woman. Whatever they carried home from that afternoon, they carried it quietly. What investigators were able to piece together came mostly from the scene itself. Judy had been forced off the road at gunpoint and taken deep into the trees. She was sexually assaulted. The shooting happened as she was trying to get dressed. Her bicycle was found on the track. Her clothing was collected and bagged, including the Waffle Stomper boots she borrowed from her little sister. Everything went to evidence storage at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. Deputies spent the next several weeks canvassing the area. The names that came up quickly as suspects were those of 2 men. One was a ranch owner who'd been known to behave inappropriately around Judy, the kind of behavior neighbors noticed, but nobody had ever formally reported. The other was a tenant on a nearby property who'd been chopping wood close to the dirt track that afternoon and gave investigators an account of his time that didn't quite hold together. Both were questioned. Neither could be connected to the crime through physical evidence. There were no witnesses to the attack, no fingerprints, no thread connecting anyone specific to what happened in those woods. By the end of 1972, Snohomish County had its oldest unsolved homicide and nothing to show for it. The evidence went into long-term storage. The file went on a shelf. Jana Loomis was 12 years old when her sister borrowed her boots and didn't come home. She watched her parents grieve for the rest of their lives. Judy's bedroom stayed untouched for years. If you walked in, Jana said later, you could still smell the patchouli. Her leather purse said exactly where she'd left it. Her parents grew old waiting for an answer that didn't come. They called the sheriff's office every year. There was nothing to update. They died, both of them, without ever knowing who killed their daughter. They raised a child. They buried her grief for 30 years. They died with the question still open. Jana kept calling after they were gone. She was the one who showed up at press conferences. The one who called detectives, the one who told reporters in 2008 that she wanted whoever did this to sweat. She wanted them to know that someone was still paying attention. She'd been carrying this case by that point for longer than Judy had been alive. She said it plainly. Judy had her whole life ahead of her. It was just taken away. And we live with that every day. In 2005, a cold case detective named Jim Scharf pulled Judy's file off the shelf. The case was 33 years old. It was the county's oldest unsolved homicide. Scharf was methodical. He went back through everything, the original evidence, the interviews, the chain of custody documentation. He re-interviewed people where he could, and he sent anything with DNA potential to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab. 3 years passed. Then, in 2008, a WSB Crime Lab technician was examining Judy's left boot under different lighting conditions and with equipment that hadn't existed in 1972. On the outside of the boot, right there where it had been the whole time, she found a semen stain. 36 years, multiple agencies, hundreds of handling events, and nobody had seen it. The technician extracted a partial DNA profile and submitted it to Cody's, the FBI's national database of offender DNA. The system ran it against every convicted offender who'd ever submit a sample. No match. Whoever killed Judy Loomis either had no qualifying convictions or his offenses predated the laws that required DNA collection or both. The profile sat in the database and ran automatically against every new entry for the next decade. Year after year, nothing came back. Scharf kept the case open through all of it. He called Jana with updates even when the update was that there was nothing new. The file had collected dust for 33 years before he touched it. He wasn't going to let that happen again. In July 2018, he tried something different. He sent the DNA profile to Parabon NanoLabs, a private forensic lab in Virginia that works in a discipline called genetic genealogy, and it operates on a completely different logic than Cody's. Instead of comparing crime scene DNA against a convicted offender database, genetic genealogy uploads the profile to consumer ancestry platforms like GEDmatch, where millions of people have voluntarily submitted their own DNA to trace their family history. If anyone in those databases shares enough genetic material with the crime scene sample, it means they're biologically related to whoever left it. Not the person themselves, a cousin, a second cousin, a distant relative who signed up to find out where their grandparents came from. From there, the genealogists build a family tree, outward and then inward. Parabon brought in a genetic genealogist named Deb Stone, based in Oregon. Stone spent 57 hours on this case alone, working through public records, census data, online family trees, court documents, birth and death records, tracing the branches from distant DNA matches all the way back in generation by generation. The branches pointed to a family in the Edmonds area of Snohomish County. Genealogy could identify a family. It couldn't tell them which member of that family had been in those woods in 1972. For that, they needed a direct sample. On August 28, 2018, investigators followed an already made suspect to the Tulalip Casino north of Everett. They watched him buy a coffee. They watched him sit at a machine, drink it, finish it, and toss the cup into a garbage can. They waited until he walked away. Then they collected the cup. It went straight to the WSB Crime Lab. In September 2018, the lab confirmed what the genealogy had pointed to. The DNA profile extracted from that discarded coffee cup matched the DNA profile from the semen stain on Judy's left boot to a statistical probability of 980 million to 1. 46 years. A coffee cup at a casino. He had been living 5 miles from the crime scene the entire time. His name was Terrence Miller. Everyone called him Terry. He was 33 years old in 1972, living in Edmonds, working as a heavy equipment operator. He was on his 3rd marriage. His name never appeared in the original investigation. Not on a single list, not in a single interview. Deputies had been looking at men who knew Judy or had been seen near that dirt track. Miller fit neither category. He raised a family. He ran a ceramic shop out of his garage with his 4th wife, Linda, who married him around 1976. They called it Miller's Cove. They kept it going for years. To the people who knew him, he was Terry the ceramics guy. Retired, quiet, a neighbor. Court records told a different story that stretched back to before the murder. At 18, he had married a 14-year-old girl. In 1968, 4 years before Judy was killed, he pulled a company truck up to a teenage girl walking in Mount Lake Terrace, called her over, and exposed himself. He admitted it to police. He was cited for lewd conduct. After the murder, accusations of molesting a preteen in the mid-1970s. 2 sisters in 1990 who reported inappropriate contact and later said it might have been accidental. No charges filed. In 1999, a man with developmental disabilities who reported sexual abuse. Prosecutors determined the incident fell outside the statute of limitations. 5 known accusations across 3 decades after 1968. Not one conviction after the original citation. When Detective Scharf announced the arrest, he called Miller a real predator. On April 11, 2019, deputies arrested Terry Miller at his home in Edmonds and charged him with first-degree murder in the death of Judy Loomis.
Yesterday, we arrested a 77-year-old Edmonds man. He's suspected of murdering 20-year-old Jody Loomis in 1972. His name is Terrence Miller. He was charged with murder in the first degree yesterday afternoon. We took him into custody yesterday morning without incident at his residence, and he was identified as a suspect through the process of genealogical DNA.
Bail was set at $1 million. He posted it. He was fitted with an ankle monitor. He was ordered to surrender any firearms from the home. He went back to the same house, the same garage, the same quiet street. The trial was delayed more than a year. Pandemic complications, defense motions challenging the DNA evidence. In October 2020, a judge denied the motion to suppress the genetic genealogy results. Jury selection began that same month in Snohomish County Superior Court before Judge David Kurtz. Prosecutors Craig Matheson and Bob Langbine built their case methodically from a stain discovered in 2008 through the Parabon analysis and Deb Stone's genealogy work to the coffee cup at the casino and the $980 million to 1 match that connected every piece. The defense attacked every link in that chain. Public defenders Laura Martin and Frederick Mall argued that 50 years of imperfect evidence handling had introduced contamination that made the DNA results untrustworthy. Martin told the jury the prosecution's entire case rested on a botched DNA analysis of the outside of a boot. Mall detailed the specifics. Deputies at the 1972 autopsy hadn't worn gloves. Evidence had been lost or unaccounted for at various points across 3 decades of storage. Under cross-examination, it came out that a WSB crime lab analyst's own DNA had shown up on a reference sample during testing. The defense's argument was consistent. The chain was broken, the evidence was contaminated, and the jury couldn't trust what any lab found after half a century. Jana stood in that courtroom and addressed the jury. She was 60 years old. 48 years had passed since her sister borrowed her boots. She told the jury that for those who remain, all we have is the hope of justice and accountability for the theft of Judy's life. She spoke about what those decades had looked like from the inside. She said that the man charged with killing her sister had celebrated birthdays and raised children, and gone on living while her family had lived with a hole that didn't close. Closing arguments ended on the afternoon of Friday, November 6, 2020. The jury began deliberating and then broke for the weekend. That Monday morning, November 9th, Terrence Miller was found dead at his home in Edmonds from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was 78. The Snohomish County medical examiner ruled it a suicide. The jury didn't know. They had resumed deliberating that same morning at the courthouse. They went through the evidence, weighed the contamination arguments, and reached their decision that afternoon. Guilty of first-degree murder. 12 jurors who had no idea the defendant was already dead looked at the DNA evidence chain and decided it held. The semen on the boot was Miller's. The coffee cup confirmed it. He killed Judy Loomis in those woods off Penny Creek Road on August 23, 1972. And the evidence he left on her sister's borrowed boot is what proved it 48 years later. Miller's defense team moved to vacate the conviction. Their argument, because he died before the verdict was read, he'd been denied his constitutional right to appeal. The conviction should be thrown out. Judge Kurtz held a hearing in December 2020. He heard from both families. He heard from the attorneys. Then he ruled against the motion. It was not the right thing to do, Kurtz said, to erase what the jury had found. The conviction stands. Detective Scharf had worked this case for 14 years by the time it ended. He said he was glad the family got to hear the verdict. It was the only thing the system had left to give them. Not a sentencing, not a prison term. The man who killed Judy had taken that from them, too, the same way he'd taken everything else. Jana was 12 years old on the afternoon she lent her sister those boots. She was 60 when the jury reached their decision. Both her parents were already gone. She heard the word guilty without them. For more solved cold cases like this one, like and follow this channel and turn on the notification bell so you will be notified when we post our upcoming solved cold case video.